you have a nation state who is embracing Austrian economics, but it's not just Austrian economics like you mentioned, right? Because Austrian economics has been tried and tested, right? But it seems like people don't really listen. It's Austrian economics with a Bitcoiner in the mix, and you were invited to be the economic advisor to the National Bitcoin Office of El Salvador. So now we have an Austrian economist giving advice to a nation state. Holy cow. Are things going to change? The fiat cartel is absolutely terrified. So what was that experience like in El Salvador? And, of course, I'm looking at this like from a third, from a bird's eye view, looking outside in. But from a historical perspective, Saif, this is insane. I don't think this has happened, right? I don't think Austrian economists have been taken seriously on a nation state level. I'm extremely bullish about that. What was that experience like with President Bukele? Did he approach you? How did you feel when that happened?
It's great. I'm very excited about this. I think El Salvador in general, putting aside the Bitcoin stuff, even ignoring Bitcoin, El Salvador is an extremely exciting country that is truly bucking the trend. And I'm an anarchist. I'm extremely cynical, and I'm always I'm always very cynical about the idea that a government can do anything good. In my mind, the only good thing that governments can do is just get out of the way and not do anything. But this thing comes along. The news about El Salvador is just day after day. They're constantly proving themselves to be truly different from what most other countries are like, and most other governments are like. So, of course, the security issue is what's most startling, which, is as I get older and I have a family, this becomes more and more of something that you care about, and you become concerned about, the safety of your kids to walk down the street. And of course, over the last 10 years, I think the world has just gotten a lot less safe. 10, 20 years, the world's been progressively getting less and less safe pretty much everywhere. Crime continues to rise more and more, particularly in the US and in the West. And then to find a country that not only reverses the trend, but almost completely destroys the crime there is absolutely mind-blowing. So it is an extremely exciting country. And I should say, we're not yet at the point where Bitcoin has made a difference in El Salvador's economy yet. It's still a tiny part of the government's cash balance. It's still, the penetration of the use of Bitcoin is still tiny in terms of the hands of people. So it isn't Bitcoin that has made the difference so far, but it is a Bitcoiner that has made the difference. I think this is the really key point. It's a Bitcoiner that has, the kind of leadership that can take on the gangs and win is also the kind of leadership that can look around and understand that, between continuing to be essentially bag holders for the US-based banking cartels and continuing to use our country as just essentially slave labor to have our people continue to work for a money that foreigners can print, is not as good of a deal as just, having our own, having an independent currency that is not controlled by anybody, that nobody else can print. So I think this is really exciting. I'm massively excited about the potential and the possibility. And this is why, I'm doing this job for free. I'm not getting paid for it, because I really am excited about being part of this, and I'm quite optimistic about it. The way it came about, really, it was Max and Stacey. Like everything in the Bitcoin world, it all starts with Max and Stacey, as always. So Max and Stacey have moved to El Salvador. They're helping the Bitcoin office there. They're also working there pro bono. They like working in that office, and they're really doing everything that they can to boost the Bitcoin experiment there. And it was Stacey who kept on insisting, you need to come and visit. And so I came after the Miami conference. I went to El Salvador. I visited. Unfortunately, I did not have the time to be able to stay long, because I had to get back home. I have kids and a wife to tend to. So I could only stay there for a couple of days. I still did manage to get a good view of the country. I swam in the Pacific, and I climbed to a volcano, and I saw, obviously an empty volcano, not an active one. But I did get a nice view of the country. I walked around downtown. I spoke to people. There's an enormous positive air around the country there. People are just very excited about the fact that they have a downtown again. They have streets. They can go play football in the streets. They can enjoy living life. They can enjoy the beautiful weather that they have almost year round. They can enjoy the amazing nature that they have, and it's a great thing. It's the entire country feels like a bunch of people who have been let out of prison, and it was in a sense prison. I mean, everybody was basically stuck at home unless they really needed to go out. The idea of just going out for leisure was unheard of, and so you look at the country, you walk around and you think, wow, this is truly beautiful. This is amazing. I mean, it's a tropical paradise, obviously there. And then you look at the kind of infrastructure that they have there, and it's obviously lacking in many ways. And then you obviously think, well, why is this place so underdeveloped? Obviously, the answer is because of the crime. Who's going to go and invest in restaurants or in factories or in businesses or in whatever it is, when there's crime that's going to come after your workers, that's going to come after your customers? Obviously, such crime is going to severely handicap and paralyze the society when it comes to being able to invest and think long term. And so you get rid of the crime, and suddenly, you can just see it. Yep, there's something missing now. Now that there's no crime, there's an economic 10x that needs to take place, and it looks like it's only a matter of time, because I mean, the crackdown has been extremely effective, and it doesn't look like the gangs can reassemble or mount any kind of serious counteroffensive. And perhaps if they manage to get some of the old political parties back in power, they might be able to do such a thing. But that doesn't look very likely. President Bukele's approval rating now is hit 93%. Basically, the only people that are not happy with him are essentially the main beneficiaries of the two old political parties, which is basically like the Democrats and the Republicans, two oligarchies that control all of the institutions of the country and fight a civil war amongst themselves, sometimes with bullets and sometimes with votes and sometimes with rigged elections and with all kinds of nasty things. But now it's astonishing. I mean, just imagine a third-party candidate in the U.S. running and, first of all, winning the election. He runs for election, doesn't even go and attend the TV debates with the Republican and Democratic candidates. So just imagine a third-party candidate who says, no, screw you. I'm not joining Biden and Trump or DeSantis or whatever in your debates. I'm not doing any of that stuff. And then he wins the election. And then the next year you have congressional elections. And then a new party that he establishes sweeps the electoral system, and then they take over the political system. And then the Republicans and the Democrats are reduced to essentially 20 or 30% of Congress. And everybody hates them. Nobody wants them anymore. It's just basically the establishment of the Democratic and Republican Party that are still clinging on to their old world, and they're just and it's so transparently self-serving, because if you had a shred of honesty, you'd have to admit that this guy's done a much better job than we ever could. So it's truly exciting what's going on there, and I think the best is yet to come. I think the president is likely to win re-election, and I think Bitcoin is likely to do its thing, and we're going to get the price of Bitcoin going up is going to be massively positive for people in El Salvador, because a lot of them have some Bitcoin. And I think, but what's more important, this pisses off some Bitcoiners sometimes when I say it, but really the most important thing is how much Bitcoin we have in cash balances. And in the case of El Salvador, the most important thing is how much the government has, because If the government can stack sats and the sats can go up in value, and they keep adding, they keep stacking sats, so the number of sats that they have goes up, and then the price of the sats in dollar terms goes up, then the government is witnessing its cash balance appreciate, which, I mean, this might sound like it's an inconsequential detail for people, but for me, this is as important as it gets, because now you don't need to go to the capital markets, you don't need to go to the IMF, you don't need to go to the World Bank to continue to borrow in order to pay your bills. And that's essentially the way that this criminal system functions, which is you need to get everybody in debt all the time, so that they're constantly borrowing, so that they become completely subservient to the interests of the money printer that keeps them alive. And the secret ingredient for that is the fact that the dollar is constantly depreciating. So you need to have a cash balance. Citizens need a cash balance. Financial institutions, banks, and businesses, they all need to have their own cash balance, and the government needs a cash balance, and the central bank has a cash balance. So everybody's holding on to cash. And in the case of El Salvador, that's all dollars. And in the case of the rest of the world, it's also predominantly dollars. Almost everybody's cash balances are in dollars or in currencies that are backed by the dollar. So you're holding some national shitcoin, but what's backing that shitcoin is that the central bank has a big bunch of dollars in reserve. So what's happening as the dollar gets devalued? Your holdings are getting devalued. So the things that you need to buy are going up in price. So how can you keep up? How can you buy more of the things that you need? The answer is get into debt. That's how it works. So, and also, and that's what I explained in the fiat standard, that the fiat standard just requires you to borrow in order to survive, no matter what your views are about debt. Even Muslims who it's very clear for them that interest lending is haram, it's forbidden in Islam. Most religious scholars in Islam today say that this is okay, that you have to do it, that it's fine, because, and I don't want to get into theology now, whether you agree or disagree whether this is okay or not, but you can sort of see the point, because if you're not doing it in a world in which everybody's using this, if in a world in which everybody is using fiat money, if you decide that I'm not going to borrow, then you are the bag holder. You're holding on to the cash is getting devalued, and you are constantly getting robbed. But when you borrow, and that's one of the key concepts in the fiat standard, when you're borrowing, new money is created every time you take out a loan. So effectively, you're benefiting to some extent from the inflation. When you have a negative fiat balance over time, that fiat is devalued. So the inflation works in your favor up to a point. And so it's much better to be on the borrowing side. So there's no way out of this, honestly, except Bitcoin. Orange coin is the only thing that fixes this. And so having the government stack more sats, I think, is really, 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 really important. And I think the implication is going to be massive. If El Salvador can get out of debt and they just cancel their national debt, and they just have a big giant stack of Bitcoin that they sit on, and then they cash out some of that Bitcoin and change it into cuckbucks every now and then in order to trade with the rest of the cuck world, then a lot of countries are going to pay attention.